India's Aviation Minister Mohan Naidu urged caution after the release of a preliminary report. On Saturday, he emphasized that this is only an initial finding and urged everyone to wait for the final report before drawing conclusions. Naidu also expressed confidence in India's aviation sector, saying the country has the finest pilots and crew in the world.
Preliminary report right now, and from the ministry we are analyzing the report, but I think it would be better if we can comment on it once the final report comes in. I don't think we should jump into any conclusions on this. I truly believe we have the most wonderful workforce in terms of pilots and the crew in the whole world. I have to appreciate all the efforts the pilots and the crew in this country are putting into the aviation. They are the backbone of this civil aviation.
Jessica Taneja, reporter, is joining us from the newsroom live for more on this. Jessica, the fuel switches on board the ill-fated Air India plane are now under the scanner. What should one make of the cockpit audio recording as detailed in the preliminary probe report?
Well, firstly, the preliminary report doesn't tell us whose audio is what. In fact, the exchange that we've been able to gather between the pilots in those crucial moments before the Air India plane crashed in Ahmedabad was that one pilot asking the other co-pilot that why did you switch it off, meaning why was the engine fuel control in the cut-off position? It should have been in the run position, which is what would then ensure fuel reaching the engines, which would fire it and potentially lead to its acceleration and as well as a safe flight. But that exactly didn't turn out to be the case in this particular incident, as we've seen that took place on June 12, a fatal accident. So with the exchanges between them, no clarity as such, and waiting for more information, particularly on the aspect of that exchange. But there is certainly a question on the fuel control switch, which then points us to what exactly led to its dysfunction, or what is the mystery behind its switch to cut off and then run. Because as we know, and as civil aviation experts have been pointing out, and it's very basic knowledge about aircraft as well, that when an aircraft is about to take off in the cockpit, the pilots usually turn off the fuel control switch, which means it's in the run position, that it's ready, and that the fuel would then fire the engines. But as the report suggests now, and from the lone survivor as well, his words in his interview as well, that there was a moment briefly in air where, when the fluctuation started, as if the plane was stable and the engines did not have enough fuel, or perhaps there was a dysfunction with the switch. And now the entirety of this, investigation will be focused on whether these switches were the problem. Now, important to also tell our viewers about one more important thing that has been pointed out by this report, which brings us to the US Federal Aviation Administration's report issued in 2018, which was a special airworthiness information bulletin. And it had said, and I quote, that potential disengagement of the fuel control switch locking feature needs to be looked at. This because another aircraft, which is the 737, this was the 787, pardon me. So the fuel switches in that seem to have shown some problems. And these are Boeing aircraft. The engines are by General Electric. So Boeing, as we know, has been quite notorious with its acceptability of problematic softwares that have led to, horrific crashes, similar to the Air India crash, but not to the extent that we saw, which in aviation history, it's been 40 years since something as devastating as this took place. So bringing back the question on, those particular switch controls, the fuel control switch, what exactly is that, and how problematic was it if in case that issue was flagged many, many years ago and Boeing just failed to sort of, work on it, or were there not enough, red flags to identify this particular technical snag? And that is where the investigation will now lead into whether this switch box, in fact, was problematic, or there will be, more suggestions into looking at what was the exact full conversation between the pilots before they called Mayday, before that fateful crash. All the investigation rests on that. But let's not forget that it is a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. There have been complaints about it. This is a unique feature of complaint that we are now witnessing when it comes to its fuel control switch. In the past, there have been many that are pointed out. Reports of pilots training on simulation softwares rather than getting an actual flight experience of the new softwares that Boeing was installing on its aircraft. So there are certainly a lot of questions to be answered here, Mohan.
Absolutely. We'll take that forward, Jessica. Also, the pilots made a valiant attempt, we know, to save the aircraft. I understand that within 10 to 14 seconds of the fuel cutoff, they had moved both fuel switches back to the run position. Both engines began automatic restart sequences, with engine 1 showing signs of recovery and engine 2 attempting to relight as per the report. But then why was the recovery not possible? Will this also be looked into, you think, in the final report?
Well, certainly, because the plane, I think for about 30 odd seconds after takeoff, was on air and had acquired a certain altitude, which would have led to further acceleration. But what it did eventually, or what eventually did happen, was that the plane decelerated again because of this technical snag, or the mysterious, alignment of the switch to either the run position or the cut-off position. So, as you stated, the pilots did try to ensure that both engines are on run position, because there are very few instances, Munmun, where the pilots would have engaged in something where would have led to a sort of misunderstanding of what was happening, because these are such important switches. So, for example, if there's a fire on one engine, these are dual engine aircraft. So that if there's fire on, or anything that has gone wrong with one engine, the pilots, through that fuel control switch, can position that switch on the cutoff position, which would then prevent further damage to the aircraft and have a possibility of saving, or being able to make a safe landing for that case. So in this particular mechanism, and the report that we've seen, the preliminary report does say that there was no particular problem with the engine where the pilot would have to, switch the fuel control to cut off instead of run. So I think we'll wait for those details, which would, as suggested by the preliminary report, take about a year to come out with all the details, with all the cockpit data, voice recorder and other details that now emerge from this as to what really happened. And further investigations into Boeing would also reveal whether this particular technical snag, which I said was pointed out by the Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin issued by the Federal Aviation Administration of United States, was also something that could have been factored in. It is very easy to point fingers at pilots and certainly ignore that these man-made planes, after all, cannot be the perfect ride you think they would be.
Absolutely. Well, stay with us, Jessica. Joining us for perspective also is Dr. Sumit Suseelan. And Dr. Sumit continues to be with us. Dr. Sumit, like a reporter has also been saying, that there's a lot of focus around fuel switch control and how, whether they were switched on, whether they were switched off, so on and so forth, considering the conversation that is now part of the preliminary report, now recorded, which was there in the cockpit between the two pilots. Do you think that the focus of the investigation could well be on this going forward?
Yeah, the focus will be on the control switch right now, because as per the report, when we are going through the report, we understood that this switch came off immediately after the takeoff. And it means that the one and another switch, the engine 1 and engine 2, it took a 2-second gap to get shut off. And immediately after the engine got shut off, the captain had tried to switch it on. But normally these type of aircrafts take around 90 seconds time to revive the engine. And they didn't have time more than 10 seconds and the aircraft came down. So now, as we can see, the aircraft, the AAIB had given a report where the aircraft manufacturer like Boeing and GE engine. The both they don't they are not claiming anything from their side. Right now they are just waiting for the another report which is expected to come after 5 months now. So in the detailed report we can understand like what is the major issue with the
No, but I'm simply
switch.
asking you, Dr.
Yes.
Susilan, that going forward, do you think that considering what has come out in the preliminary report, the focus is going to be on the switch control mechanism for the fuel?
Yes, the entire focus will be now only on the switch, where the G engine and the aircraft. Completely, they had wrote out that there is no involvement of all these things. This only the focus should be on these switches now.
Okay. Also, another question, Jessica, that I would want to come back to you with is that after, like you said, the FAA flagged the concern in 2018 around fuel control switch, we understand that Air India did not carry out the suggested inspections because the bulletin was quote-unquote advisory rather than mandatory. So the airline had replaced the aircraft's throttle control module twice, once in 2019 and then in 2023. But these replacements were not related to fuel switch issues, we are being told. So the question is that whether this particular area of concern will also be looked into on whether oversight precipitated matters.
Well, there have been issues with aircraft maintenance, both ground staff and engineering staff. It has been widely reported in the media as well, and there are figures to suggest that that has been the case in the past. But what is important to understand also, Mohan, is, this is a complex matter in its entirety. And one fatal air crash that we've seen in the last 40 years, and now in question is the fuel control switch, which has never been the case many a times, because this is a very guarded box, with a control, with a proper lock mechanism. So there has to be a lot of understanding and a lot of technicalities to be understood about this particular mechanism and what is that mysterious cause that led the fuel control switch to go on cut-off position instead, when it was instead of the run position it should have stayed on, as was the case when it was taking off. And experts, I'm sure, will be able to answer and be able to give us more perspective on this. But it is for a reason that the entire investigation has seemed to focus on this fuel control switch, as you point out, because there is nothing else that suggests. I mean, if you'd recall with conspiracy theories broadcasted everywhere, suggesting that there could have been something wrong with the wings or the landing gear. There were all kinds of, analysis put forth for the public to view. But this preliminary report does suggest that there is, a lot needs to be figured out and pointed out as to how that a particular, fuel control switch mechanism must have really been at the heart of this entire crash. And whether it's the pilots or Boeing or the engines, clearly only time will tell as we wait for this complete report, which could, as I said, take another year.
Okay. Jessica, stay with us. Dr. Susilan is currently not with us, but we'll be going back to him in a bit. But, as information kept coming out and we started drawing our analysis from the preliminary probe findings, we were looking at various possibilities and what could really have happened. So now the question is, what are the probably causes that have been ruled out? The probable causes that have been ruled out, for instance, a bird strike. If you could, share your thoughts on that.
That's correct. Probable cause of a bird strike, which was initially a point of consideration, if not one of the main points of, or the main reasons for this fatal air crash. But certainly that has been ruled out. Apart from that, some engine failure as well. There were also suggestions that the fuel tank was overfilled, and perhaps that also could have created or caused some trouble. All of these, or pilot error as well, in more ways than one, that now is under speculation. So there were multiple reasons given for this particular crash, but I think none of them have made it to the preliminary report as to the question of the fuel control switch, which certainly looks like on anticipated lines now will be the center of the entire investigation, and perhaps make Boeing answer a few questions as well, since this particular control mechanism has withheld scrutiny. It has been able to sort of been installed in various planes as well, and given the kind of guarantee that Boeing has offered with its plane after looking at some of its aircraft being grounded, if you'd recall, just a few years ago because of its software glitches. There has to be a lot of trust build-up mechanism for Boeing, but that hasn't been the case. And certainly, the causes that were initially pointing in a direction where it could have been an aircraft failure, for example, due to no maintenance and lack of engineering staff who could have ensured and seen through the safety mechanisms thoroughly, because it is important. And before takeoff, there are engineers who take rounds, more than 3 rounds, to check with all the things, and sometimes the plane is even grounded for hours in case the engineers on the ground feel that there have to be some parts that need to be fixed. So all of those things have been ruled out, and certainly now the question rests on the mystery switching of the fuel control mechanism from run to cut off mid-air.
We'll leave it at that. Jessica Taneja reporting from the newsroom.